All right, let's go to the other big story today, that rate hike from the RBA, the central bank. It wasn't supposed to happen if you believe the so-called experts, but it did. The cash rate's up 25 basis points to 3.85%. That's a lot more pain, isn't it, for the 3.5% for almost Australians with a mortgage. Joining me now, Sky News Business Editor Ross Greenwood. Ross, I made the point, most people predicted there would be no RBA lift today, that they would be held on pause. It went up. Were you surprised? That's the first thing. How's the market reaction? And two, do you think it'll rise again?
Well, yeah, I was surprised, I must admit, because I thought after last month's pause that they'd probably sit for another month and just let it soak in and see what impact was happening. But what happened was that the inflation data came out last week, and I think that shocked the Reserve Bank that it wasn't coming down as quickly as they would have liked. And the second thing is that it showed that really the inflation has crept out into the services industries of Australia. And once it gets out there, it becomes more embedded in our economy and is much more difficult to get out. And so as a result of this, you've suddenly found that the Reserve Bank has raised these rates again to try and head it off. Now, you've got to say that the Reserve Bank was pretty upfront and honest and effectively said, look, you know, we are still biased towards raising interest rates. So for those people who have rushed out to try and think that the rate rises were over, there were no more coming, well, the rate rise, that's where the surprise hit. The second thing also is it shows its independence because, of course, the budget comes out next week. And if you ever want to see an independent Reserve Bank acting ahead of a budget, well, this was it.
I got to ask you, though, about that point you made there, that the inflation rate's not coming down fast enough. It was 7.8%, you correct me if I'm wrong, 7.8% from memory, dropped down to 7%. We know the target band they like is 2 to 3%. Does that mean until it gets down, let's say to the top end to 3, we are going to be prone to continued rate rises all the way from that 7 point to that 3 point, because that's still a big way to go?
So that's the delicate balancing act that Philip Lowe has talked about before, the narrow path that our economy is on. Effectively, that's what should happen. And if you go to the United States, it's exactly what's going to happen. So on Thursday morning, we'll have heard that the United States will have raised interest rates there again by another 0.25%, taking its cash rate beyond 5%, which is where its inflation rate is. So it's doing exactly that. Here in Australia, though, because of the impact on variable rate mortgages, which aren't as prevalent in other parts of the world, it's thought that the interest rate rises will long-term have a bigger impact on our demand, on our spending. And so, therefore, eventually the interest rate, the inflation rate will come down. But Philip Lowe has also said he's almost prepared to glide our economy out until 2025 to get inflation back to 2 and 3%. But he was quite adamant when he did a press conference after the RBA review was handed down when we spoke with him that he would act if there was any inflation outbreak quickly. He's now seen it, he's acted. He's shown really the Reserve Bank is still prepared to move quickly if it really sees that this inflation is becoming stubborn in that services industry, and remember, they are fearful of public servants' wages rising as well.
Well, they've all got an ask in. Let's go to the other news today. This changing of the guard at Qantas. Alan Joyce, the CEO, has announced his retirement. We knew it was coming, and his replacement will be the former Chief Financial Officer, Vanessa Hudson. She'll shift into the role of CEO. How's that been received, and what can you tell us about Hudson?
Well, I can tell you the first thing is, you know, this is never a good thing to say. The share market overall was down. The share price of Qantas fell by 2.8% today. But Vanessa Hudson has been there alongside Alan Joyce as the tough decisions during COVID, including sacking 9,500 people, standing down many more workers at the airline, really putting the airline into abeyance as they really faced, if you like, its own financial cliff of 11 weeks. They really had to get that airline to survive. She's been there, but that's not the same as being the chief executive, because you think about Alan Joyce himself, he's a polarising character. You know, people either really like him or indeed they really don't like him, and they tell him that way. And it's interesting, even today, in talking with Richard Goyder, the chairman of Qantas, and doing an interview with him and sitting down talking to him about this, and even then how they went through the process to get Vanessa Hudson. She had to be conscious of the personal attacks, had to be conscious of the pressures that she would come under, as Alan Joyce did elected in 2011 when he actually had to ground the whole airline because of a dispute with the unions. So you've got to have steel. You've got to have steel to do this job. You've got to be prepared to make very hard and tough decisions and to take really the personal assaults on yourself, quite literally, because it's your whole family that is going to be involved if you take on one of these types of roles.